Genshin Impact is dying is a sentence that you have probably had a misfortune of hearing before, because for some reason a lot of people really like the idea of Genshin dying, with some even going as far as to gaslight themselves into thinking that it is in fact already dying, with the reasoning usually being that miHoYo are killing their own game by not implementing that one really specific thing that they want to see in the game. And if you're wondering how it can come to be that some people get this delusional about the video game, to be honest, I don't know. And I'll also have it be known that I'm not all that interested in finding out as to why. Mainly for the sake of my own psyche, since the longer you stare into the abyss of internet degeneracy, the higher the likelihood that you'll get corrupted as well. Which I, for quite obvious reasons, would prefer to avoid. And I'd also advise you to do the same, if your mental well-being is of any value to you. But it is as they say, a broken cock is right twice a day. I think that was supposed to be clock. And as far as the claim that miHoYo has or currently is in the midst of quote-unquote killing Genshin Impact stands, there might actually be some truth to it, though maybe not in the way that certain quote-unquote rather unique individuals might hope. Yeah, let's go with that. But yeah, allow me now to address the elephant in the room. The reason you probably clicked on this video. How exactly has miHoYo killed Genshin Impact? Partially, that is. Okay, so let us now travel back to the day of Genshin Impact's release, back to the ancient time of September 2020. To say that the release of Genshin revolutionized the gacha game landscape is an understatement to say the least, since it was after all the first time in the genre of gacha games where the quote-unquote game part actually felt present. That's a joke, calm down, I was joking. You can stop typing your scathing hate comments now. Thanks. But because of the obscene levels of success miHoYo was seeing because of Genshin, with it being the first quote-unquote AAA gacha game and all that, it led to a lot of people obviously checking it out. But it is as they say, with they in this case being me, a game made for everyone ends up being made for no one. I know. I guess you can say that I'm somewhat of a philosopher myself. But this quote that I most definitely did not invent and has probably heard somewhere before but can't recall where, obviously applies to Genshin Impact as well. The game is clearly not for everyone, as can be clearly seen by spending like 10, closer to maybe 5 seconds on social media, to use a conservative estimate. This meant that a lot of people that decided to check out Genshin found themselves to like the quote-unquote idea of Genshin more than they actually liked Genshin itself, if that makes any sense. Leading to these unfortunate souls to now end up with no alternative, having nowhere to go, if you will, since back then Genshin was the only game of its kind. So I guess you could say that Genshin was suffering from success. Then there's also to expect any game to maintain a level of dominance akin to what Genshin had over the gacha game genre during COVID would be extremely delusional, to say the least, since no game has ever managed such a feat, because eventually some other game would come along and offer a similar but still different enough experience that might be preferred by some players. But even assuming that it still wouldn't be for these players, eventually there would be yet another game to come out, a game that, this time, might actually be what these players have been looking for. Something that miHoYo themselves have recognized. And how do I know that? Because they were the fucking ones who decided to release that other game. Yeah, having the biggest gacha game wasn't enough for them. They wanted to ensure that they were the engineers behind the second ever AAA gacha game as well, which would be a game that would be similar enough to Genshin, whilst at the same time being different enough so that it could both attract people who never fucked with Genshin in the first place, but could also attract those who might have been intrigued by Genshin, but for whatever reason didn't end up sticking with it. With this also being a great way for them to spread their legs up. I mean, eggs into different baskets instead of keeping all of them in one, because as you can probably imagine, if that one basket with all the eggs somehow breaks, well, to put it mildly, you're fucked. Which isn't ideal. And thanks to all the recently acquired Genshin money, which was a lot of money, miHoYo were more than ready enough to pull this off, and to the surprise of probably nobody, they ended up succeeding. Enter Honkai Star Rail, the game that partially killed Genshin Impact. Okay, obviously, even saying that it quote-unquote partially killed Genshin is in of itself hyperbole. But it is kinda true that HSR did somewhat cannibalize Genshin's player base a bit, with the same also applying to Zenless on Zero among some other gacha games as well. And to now quickly quench any accusation of this somehow being me insinuating that these games are somehow better than Genshin, yeah, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. Genshin is still the definitive top dog in the gacha game sphere, sitting comfortably at the top, something I really doubt will change anytime soon. But yeah, to be honest, for me personally, I consider current Genshin to be the best it has ever been, something that I partially attribute to the fact that miHoYo's entire existence is no longer exclusively tied to Genshin, which means that they can afford to experiment and take more risks with their game. Basically what I'm trying to get at here is that I doubt we would have gotten a villain like Rerir being featured so prominently in the main story, if not for the quote-unquote Hoyoverse player base being spread out between a few more games than just Genshin Impact. So to summarize, Genshin Impact is doing fine, great even. And what miHoYo did to Genshin is basically the video game equivalent of, you know that thing when you let gas out of a bloated cow or something? You know, like this. God, I hope that analogy made sense. Though I guess in a way you could, from a more nihilistic perspective that is, technically make the argument that miHoYo did in fact quote-unquote kill Genshin Impact. Well, partially of course that is. Which then also means that the very much so clickbaity title for this video is at least somewhat justified. Or that is at least what I tell myself. Oh, and yes, I am very much aware this video is literally just me explaining how asset diversification is generally a good thing. But with that being said, this video has now come to an end. So if you enjoyed it, why not check out this other video of mine on the screen right now? That would be very kind of you. And of course, as always, thank you all very much for watching and take care. I hope to see you return for my next upload, whenever that might be.